All right, welcome to episode 14 of the Property Prescription with Tony and Phil. How
Fantastic.
are you?
Yeah.
Good?
Good.
Good? All right, so what are we talking about today?
Look, in the news, I've been hearing about some new law or some new changes for underquoting.
Yep.
I just heard about it peripherally. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, it's been a common issue, and it's been common, especially in Melbourne and Sydney, predominantly, where they're very strong auction markets. Underquoting is illegal, but we've seen a lot of stories over the years, and we actually had Thomas at our office actually put together a couple of examples with a few case studies in Melbourne that we recently saw. So Victoria's become, they often, consumer affairs, target one particular state or one particular agency. There's been over 5,000 complaints since 2022.
Okay.
That's just in Victoria, 5,000. In 2022-23, 2,500 contacts to consumer affairs, complaints to consumer affairs. That is a lot within that period, which was interesting. So some case studies. There was a Box Hill townhouse that was quoted at $9 to $990. What do you think it sold for? Do you want to guess, roughly?
I presume it's very underquoted.
Yes.
1.5?
1.435.
Yeah.
Then another one in Doncaster East. The home was quoted by the agent by 1.1 to 1.2. What do you think it sold for?
Something similar.
1.5.
1.5.
1.793.
That's almost double.
You can probably understand the Box Hill townhouse. It's probably underquoted by 100, 150, but the Doncaster East home,
that was never going to be that price.
That is very significant. So the fact they even got away with actually quoting at that range, that is a big issue. And then there was a Laylaw property in the northern suburbs of Melbourne, quoted at 575 to 625. What do you think it sold for?
900.
720. So that's actually not that bad. I don't think that's that bad.
Can I just, for those who don't understand what underquoting is, so essentially when you go, and this only really applies to auctions, obviously.
Yes.
When there's a house for auction, you get a range of the price. And I presume underquoting is, obviously it's illegal, but the idea is the house is worth $1 million approximately on market, but you're quoting it at 800,000 for the range. So why do they do that? What benefit does it? Because they're still going to sell at that price.
Well, I think there's a famous saying that agents you have used over the years. Quote it low and watch it go, and it's been very common. And I've actually heard this when we were actually going out and buying. And it's actually, from my end, it's more around you've got to do the due diligence and you've got to work out your set price if you're ever turning up to an auction. Now there are certain good quality properties that sell for a premium. But a lot of agents over the years have, I think agents actually do a great job, most of them, and I think they quote within the range. But a lot of them, when you go to an auction, is it going to stay within 10% of the range? Is it going to stay within 20% of the range? And occasionally you see these sort of outliers occurring on the ground. So if you're a novice investor or a novice home buyer and you've never turned up to an auction before, it's really difficult to get a gauge of where the pricing should sit. And I think that creates a lot of frustration. If you're a first home buyer, you're a young doctor looking to buy your first property, your first home, doctors and just the general public have no idea in terms of where the pricing or valuation should sit on that property. So it's very confusing. And now what they've done, they've set the reserve price. So if you're in Victoria, they'll set the actual reserve price before the auction. So if you turn up to that particular property, you've got at least a realistic idea in terms of what that vendor will end up, what is the reserve price they're prepared to put the property on the market and sell it. So there was an old sort of industry veteran, John Keating, that, from Keating's Real Estate in Wood End, that tried to introduce this a number of years ago. And all the local Melbourne agents hated, they weren't particular fans of this particular strategy. But after years and years and years of lobbying it, I think John Keating's been able to get this through. So I think it allows for a lot more transparency in the market. If people are turning up to an auction, at least they can get a vague idea. Still might sell well and truly above that reserve price. But it'll save, Tony Chen from turning up to a property in Melbourne thinking that they're a relatively good chance of securing this property, and then walking away completely depressed, demoralised, that they missed out by not 50 grand, by $300,000 or $400,000.
Yeah, like that Doncaster East property.
Correct. You know, that's and unfortunately, that's why people come and see us, because we can do the due diligence for them. We know it, and if they're wasting their time on a particular area or a property, at least we can actually have an open and honest discussion with them and say, look, we probably think this particular property is valued at this particular price point. Maybe perhaps don't consider it, or this is the pricing that you realistically need to be at.
Obviously, the law is to really stop people from wasting their time looking at properties that are out of their price range anyway. So what is it? It's they have to show the reserve a week before.
Yeah, so basically the reserve price needs to be disclosed before they take that property to market. So 1 week, 2 weeks prior to the auction occurring, a reserve price needs to be set. And then before you turn up to the auction, at least you've got a relatively good idea in terms of how to run the auction, what price you should be paying. And then if you walk away, then it's extremely transparent.
And just out of interest, are agents expecting people to show up and then just get carried away with the auction? Is that their idea?
That is the theatre. So the theatre of there is a theatre around the auction market, predominantly Sydney and Melbourne. You know, in terms of the auction market's been there's a lot of industry veterans that are fantastic auctioneers that present well, know how to market the property. So there is a really defined skill set with an average auctioneer versus a really quality auctioneer. And I've loved going to auctions over the years all across the country, and it's actually quite enjoyable listening to a good auctioneer do their thing. But Melbourne and Sydney especially have been very, very strong auction markets. So in New South Wales, you can get fines of up to $22,000, which is pretty serious. And also that agent can lose their commission that they get charged for. Victoria's, you've got fines of up to $38,000 per breach. So the new laws coming in requiring the reserve disclosure, you've got to have comparable property evidence. So Consumer Affairs every now and then investigate a particular agency, or they target a particular agency. And then you've actually got to go to Consumer Affairs and you've got to show, well, how did you come up with that particular figure? How did you come up with that particular quoting range? And if you don't supply them with the right evidence, you can get fined. And it has happened before and over the years.
I mean, prior to this law coming in, the reserve is just set on the day.
Correct. You do it.
You can set it whenever you want.
So we've dealt with vendors where they haven't actually disclosed, and we've helped them, you know, run the sale for them and engage the agent. Often we're on the other side as well, acting for a doctor looking to sell their, you know, large house in Melbourne or Sydney. And we've said, we're not going to disclose the reserve price until basically while the auction's being done, or just before, or when they come inside and then they say, right, are we putting the property on the market? So you've almost got to get a bit of a feel for how the auction's going on the day and the amount of interest. Usually you can ascertain the reserve price on the night before or 3 days out prior to the auction being done, because you've got a relatively good idea of, well, how many interested parties are going to turn up to that particular property. So usually a good auction, in terms of getting above the reserve price, you've usually got 3 to 5 bidders, keen, interested bidders that have done their building inspection, done all their due diligence. So you can actually be fairly confident that you're going to get a good result if you've got 3 to 5. If you've got less than 3, you're in a bit of trouble. So you may not get to the reserve price. You may not hit that particular end result. And then there's nothing wrong with passing the property in and then negotiating after. And I've said to doctors in the past, hey, if it doesn't sell, it's not the end of the world. Maybe that particular buyer wasn't ready or didn't have their funding in place. Things go wrong on the day, and they do. So making sure that you keep your reserve price, that is the price that you're happy to sell that property, and just be realistic. If it doesn't reach it, then there are other avenues to sell properties.
And just on the other side, if you are a fairly inexperienced buyer, let's say they're not engaging your services, what advice do you have for them to sort of prevent themselves getting trapped into this?
Well, don't bring your parents with you, because your parents will end up paying, so basically doctors that have had their parents turn up always tend to pay a premium to secure it. set your expectations in terms of where the value should sit the night prior, knowing that this is your walk away price. If you miss that sort of valuation, I always add in terms of the expectations for that buyer, always add another 5%, because they do turn up on the day and pay an extra 10, 20, 30. Please don't get carried away, because there will be another asset there for you to consider.
That's true.
And it'll slow down your ability to invest as well. So I think it's really important that you are very firm in terms of where you set that pricing. Most of the time, you're not going to get these particular, if it's your home, you're not going to get it for a bargain. Go in knowing that you're going to have to pay a premium if it's the asset that you really want to live in and it's your long-term hold. And be very realistic. Auctioneers are there to play with your emotions. They're there to trigger something in you, and it's very transparent because you know obviously where the other bidder is. But I find on a number of occasions people get caught up in the theatre and they end up paying way too much for that particular asset. It happens, and I see it happening a lot.
I do actually. I think we should do another topic on auction techniques. Or
yes,
I do find that, you know, you raise your hand and it's like $10,000 even towards the end, and then most of us, I mean, I do. I know it's stupid, but I squinge on a few cents at the supermarket because like, oh, that one's on sale and it's like 10 cents off. And then you raise your hand and it's like it would wipe every single saving you've ever done at the supermarket. I think people do get carried away in that theatre, but money is still money. Just because 10,000 is relatively smaller compared to the price of the house, but it's still $10,000 you could have spent somewhere else.
And you can be aggressive in terms of your bidding. So you've got to get a lay of the land in terms of how that auction's going, and usually you can get a very good read before they put the property on the market. So if you really want a property and you see other people in the crowd, you know that it's going to be competitive, be aggressive. You know, don't go up in $1,000, $2,000 increments, because they'll come straight back at you. Keep your budget, set it, try and be aggressive, and then if you want to knock them out, there's a strategy there to knock them out at the very end. So leave the knockout bid towards the end. But every auction's different. You know, every property's different depending on the demand. So
I think we should definitely do a whole.
Yeah. Why don't we do a dummy auction, Mike? You can be the auctioneer, and we can be bidding, or I'll run the auctioneer between you two, and we can just talk about some techniques.
Yeah.
All right.
And I'll underquote the property.
Yeah. Well, you can be the agent. Okay. Yeah. All right. Perfect. Fantastic. All right. We'll leave it there. It was a great, interesting topic. So jump on Property Investing for Doctors on our Facebook group, and anything there that you need to learn and educate, we're there to help.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Tony.